Today, we finish going over UFC 304, which will include Molly McCann taking an L, Muhammad Mokaev taking multiple L's but winning a fight, as well as any other action-packed thing that went down on the prelims. I say that because there wasn't a ton, but there was a little bit. But more importantly on this video, just to get right to it, we're going to talk about how dumb Muhammad Mokaev is. All of this and more on today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. What's up? What's happening? Let's go. What's up, guys? We right back at it. We right back with it. It's your boy, Matt. We're going to go ahead and break down UFC 304, the prelims. I broke down the main card yesterday, so please go back, check out that video. We went through the entire main card, including the monumental co-main event win and the main event loss. So please check that out. But right now, we're going to go over the rest of the fights on UFC 304. Just kind of breeze through them real quick. And then I want to talk about this idiot, Muhammad Mokaev, who has now been, the UFC has chosen not to renew his contract. So let's start out with the top. The main event of the prelims. Nathaniel Wood stepped in the octagon with Daniel Pineda. This was actually a banger of a fight. Daniel Pineda, dude, he just has this amazing ability to rush into the pocket, get caught multiple times, get wobbled, sometimes gets sat down. Most of the time he gets backed up. But when the homie takes a huge shot that would lay out most fighters, he actually takes the shot, backs up, resets, and then fires back. Every time. If you look at this fight, every time he gets wobbled, every time he gets hurt, he takes a moment, he backs up, he resets, and he fires again. Now, it doesn't usually work out good for him, but still, shout out to him for being able to take that type of punishment. But I mean, at the end of the day, Nathaniel went in there. His boxing was sharp. It was crisp. He had really good leg kicks. He really chewed up Pineda's leg throughout the entire fight and then just beat him with the hands. Just his boxing looked really good. He rocked, he wobbled Pineda multiple times, but I mean, shout out to Daniel. He stayed in the fight. He stayed with it, and he lost the fight by unanimous decision. So Nathaniel Wood goes out there, gets a win in Manchester. Good for him. He moves forward. Let's move on. What about Molly McCann? Not so meatball Molly McCann. She's a little bit leaner now, down at strawweight, stepping in the octagon with Bruna Brazil. Okay, so basically, I'm not going to say Molly looked bad in this fight. I think this was more of a situation where Bruna caught her early, multiple times to the body, devastating body kicks, and good body work with the hands. She caught her multiple times early, and Molly, in my opinion, was just never able to fully recover. But to her credit, even though she was getting caught with these devastating body blows, Molly really, in Daniel Pineda style, like I just got finished talking about, I mean, she managed to keep resetting and continuing the fight, including multiple times that she would kind of lock up Bruna up against the side of the octagon to buy her some time. There was some times that this went to the ground, and Molly didn't look halfway bad. But it's just she could never recover from those brutal, devastating body blows by Bruna. And, that was all she wrote. And I mean, and even with that being said, Molly was kind of coming on strong there in the third round when she started to let her hands go, but it just wasn't enough time and she had just taken too much damage. So Bruna Brazil goes out there, gets the win. She moves forward. I think Molly still has life there at strawweight. That's definitely where I would like to see her at. She can still take a shot. Her speed looks good. I will say this fight, she didn't look to be as good of shape as she came into at her strawweight debut. I feel like her first fight at strawweight, she really looked good. She was in better shape. She was a lot leaner than she was in this fight, and I feel like she had more endurance and was a lot faster. Now, this fight, she still looked solid, but she didn't look like she came in as good of shape as her previous fight at strawweight. With that being said, I think she should definitely stay at strawweight because, going back up to flyweight, I just feel like she doesn't have the height or the range or the reach for that. Even though Bruno was kind of, maxing out all of those attributes on her in this fight. Nevertheless, shout out to Bruna Brazil. She moves on. Molly McCann will still be around. She's a name, so she can always get a big fight. Let's move on to Jake Hadley stepping in there at short notice against Kyolan Loughran. Man, Loughran, man, he's a fairly good fighter. He's just very stiff in his striking. Kind of tends to stand kind of squared up to his opponents, and his striking is very stiff. And Hadley was just letting the hands go. Great boxing. He was just letting them go. And while, Loughran, he definitely has a chin on him. He can take a shot. He just didn't look as good in this fight as I've seen him look previously. But shout out to Hadley. I picked him to lose this fight, but he goes out there, he gets a win. He looked pretty solid at bantamweight. I still think that that's not his division. But, he didn't look half bad. But I still think if he can dial in his weight cuts, he's probably more of a force at flyweight. But we'll see, though. But he did look good. Jake Hadley goes out there and gets the win. Let's talk about Muhammad Mokaev. Steps in there with Manel Kape. Okay, so this fight right here had all of the heat. More heat than any other fight. Even more than Bilal and Leon. Going into this fight card. These two had already had an altercation at the UFC PI in which that altercation, I believe they had an argument of some sort at the UFC PI, which was a while ago. Then they had another altercation at the UFC PI in which it's rumored and kind of alluded to by Eric Nixick, who is the coach of Manel Kape, that Manel Kape went in and headbutted Muhammad Mokaev, right? This was going to be some months back. So then during fight week last week, Manel Kape, he's going through the process of cutting weight. This is just a few days before they're about to weigh in, or the day before the weigh-ins. But Manel Kape he's basically doing his thing at the hotel, kind of going through his process of trying to shed a little bit of the weight. But I'm not sure if he was in the full-blown cut. Nevertheless, Muhammad Mokaev, rolls up on him and says, let's take a photo, to show Muslim solidarity. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the religion that both men have. And he asked Manel Kape to pose with him for a picture to show that they can overcome the adversity, so on and so forth. Manel Kape agrees to do that. And then Muhammad Mokaev, after the photo, sneak attacks him. And I already had spoken about that in a previous video last week of how much of a B move that is. That was just whack. That was just lame. Any type of adjective you want to use to describe that, that's what that was. So going into this fight, there was a whole lot of animosity to the point where these two ran at each other on the stage during the ceremonial weigh-ins, as well as they tried to attack each other before the fight even started when they were actually in the octagon. They had to be pulled apart. So nevertheless, this was going to be the grudge match of all grudge matches. Then the fight begins, and I wouldn't necessarily blame it all on Manel Kape. Manel Kape seemed to be willing to engage, but you could tell he was worried about the takedowns of Mokaev, right? Mokaev didn't really seem to be too willing to engage. He had a few body kicks, a few punches that he threw, but he wasn't really willing to engage a whole lot. At one point, Manel Kape actually broke or dislocated his toe, and he pretty much leaned over to try to fix it. Mokaev rushed in on him, and then Cop stood up and tried to land a huge right hand, I believe. Could have been a left, but I mean, he swung for the fences on him. And it was clear that, his toe was dislocated, but he continued the fight. And even on that 1 foot, because I believe that happened in the second round, even on that 1 foot, Manel Cop was still putting up a good battle against Mokaev. And in my opinion, I feel like Manel Cop won that fight. I feel like he did just a little bit more damage than what Mokaev did. But anyway, Muhammad Mokaev actually gets the win by decision, right? Right, okay. I didn't really agree with the decision, but he gets the win. Later on in the night, of course, at the end of the night, Dana White is what I'm trying to get to, is giving he's at the post-fight press conference, and he pretty much says, throws it out there just like a alley-oop, a lob, just whoop, throws it out there that they're not going to re-sign Muhammad Mokaev. They're not going to re-sign him because apparently they've had tons of issues getting him in the octagon. He's had tons of issues with the matchmakers. He also had all of the issues with Manel Cop. Then you also have the fact that in his post-fight press conference, Mokaev being him, he even, incriminates himself and talks about what he did to Manel Cop when he attacked him, which was that wasn't the brightest. And overall, I mean, this might be one of the dumber men in mixed martial arts because in his division, he's a shoo-in to get a title shot. He's on a winning streak. He's got everything going for him. But all of these, all of these incidents are now coming out. And shout out to the MMA Guru. He also made a video talking about this where he talked about a lot of the events, but there's been quite a few times, like multiple incidents with with Jake Hadley, guy we were just talking about. I mean, it's like, I don't know what's wrong with this dude because you can't go to PFL or Bellator. I mean, I don't even think they have a division for him at this moment. So he'd have to go up to 135 to be able to fight, and I don't know how effective he would be there, nor who wants to go from the UFC to one of those organizations outside of Francis Ngannou. You know what I'm saying? He's the only one that wanted to do it. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know what this dude is going to end up doing, but it wasn't bright. When you hear, and I'm not going to speak on all of the behind the scenes issues because I would just kind of be saying it secondhand. I don't really have any sources where I know for sure, but like I said, there was tons of issues with the matchmakers. Of course, all of the issues with Manel Cop, then him incriminating himself, talking about the sucker punch on Manel Cop. And overall, it just wasn't good, as well as you're in the middle of the octagon. You just won the fight, and instead of really honing in and calling out Pantoja, you're talking about the UFC, renegotiating your contract, which is something that they don't, look, UFC don't get down like that. Whatever is talked about behind closed doors, you need to keep that behind closed doors. Any fighters that might ever watch this video, probably none, but if you do and you're a young up-and-coming fighter, remember this. Backroom bonuses, don't talk about them. Extra money they slide you for taking short notice fights, don't talk about it. Squabbles, beefs with the matchmakers and Dana White, don't talk about it. If you attack fighters, getting the squabbles behind the scenes, don't talk about it. You know what I'm saying? I could just keep on throwing up fingers and listing them off, but don't talk about any stuff that goes on in the back room. UFC don't get down like that no more. They don't like that. Back in the day, the veteran fighters knew, and they never spoke about anything. The younger fighters, social media fighters, they're going to talk about it, and then their career suffers because of it. So nevertheless, Muhammad Mokaev gets the win, but he's out of the UFC now, so, it's almost like Manel Cop is probably going to keep cruising forward, and we'll see what happens. But nevertheless, that was that. Muhammad Mokaev goes out there and gets the win and loses his job. You know what I'm saying? Homie got the win and still lost his job. So, never good. As I check my notes, let's move on. We had Oban Elliott stepping in there with Preston Parsons. Shout out to Oban Elliott, the Welsh gangster. He goes out there, he gets the win. He looks solid in this fight. Great wrestling, great scrambling, great grappling. So shout out to him. Next, we had Modestas Bukauskas stepping in there against Marcin Prachnio. Shout out to Modestus. I mean, Prachnio went out there and spammed a lot of kicks in the first round, a lot of big techniques, a lot of spinning moves, and gassed himself out, which usually happens to Prachnio. So he just didn't really have nothing else. And shout out to Modestus as he finished out the fight. You know what I'm saying? Finished out the fight, defeated Prachnio by submission. So shout out to him. I thought he was going to take an L in that fight, but he didn't. And Prachnio, once again, gasses out, trying to do all these big, wild techniques. He's really got to rein that in. Anyway, let's move on. We had Sam Patterson step in the octagon with Kiefer Crosby. Sam Patterson puts him away early. Submits him early. Gets it over with. Gets it over with. He's free to hit the bars early. You know what I'm talking about? Shout out to Sam Patterson. Let's move on. We had Mick Parkin go out there and defeat Brzezinski. I mean, it's what that boy Mick Parkin does. I like Mick Parkin. I like his stand-up. I like his boxing. Plus, he trains with that dude, Tom Aspinall. So, shout out to him. He moves forward. Great win for him. Finally, first opening fight of the entire night. We had Shauna Bannon, Mama B, Shauna Bannon step in there with Alice Ardeline. Here's the thing, man. Alice is, she's known via Instagram and, OnlyFans circles, things like that. She does a whole lot of content like that. Mama B might do the same thing herself. I'm going to just say it off top. Shauna is not a good fighter whatsoever. She's just not a good fighter. She's a terrible hire by the UFC. They hired her hoping she was going to be able to capture some of that Irish that Irish wit. You know what I'm saying? That Irish charisma. But I don't think she has that, nor is she a good fighter. And then as for Alice, she's got a long way to go. You know what I'm saying? She got to hone her skills. She got a long way to go. So that wasn't too good either. But nevertheless, Shauna Bannon goes out there. She gets the win. She kept spamming the same little, technique coming forward, throwing hands and feet. But she's just not a good fighter. I'm sorry if she ever sees this. I apologize, but you got to step it up. Alice, I think, might have a little bit more to work with because she's got power, but she got a long way to go too. So that was the rest of UFC 304 prelims, and I kind of dove off into whatever's going on with Muhammad Mokaev, who is no longer a fighter in the UFC. So shout out to Manel Kopp because he lost that fight, but he kept his job, and he will move forward because they're going to need somebody to fill that spot in the flyweight division because Pantoja is going to need somebody to fight. Not saying Manel Kopp is going to be his next opponent, but I don't think Manel Kopp really lost anything taking that loss. Plus, I feel like he won that fight, and I see a lot of people felt that way online. So, nevertheless, man, I will be right back with you guys, maybe even tomorrow, covering a little bit more of the fallout of UFC 304. And also, I need to do a breakdown for what's coming up this weekend as we have Umar stepping in there with Corey Sandman Sandhagen. So we're going to get into all of that. So, once again, I do appreciate you guys for checking out these videos. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know. Do you think Muhammad Mokaev is an idiot as much as I do? Let me know. And once again, I do want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA. And I'll check you next time. Peace.